As many of you know, World Consumer Rights Day has been coordinated by Consumers International for over 4 decades now, bringing together our global network to highlight key consumer issues and drive collective advocacy. This year, this year's campaign, focused on safe products, confident consumers. Product safety is fundamental to protecting consumers' lives and health, and to maintain trust in the marketplace. As you can see on the screen, Consumers International with its members have advocated in this arena for very long, starting on the 1980s. And for example, in 1982, we and our members led a global campaign against toxic pesticides, mobilizing 300 plus organizations across 50 countries and helping stop exports without government consent. Of course, I won't read all the milestones, but you can see that throughout the time, this has been always a top priority for us, with the most recent milestones being our coordination and collaboration with international organizations such as the OECD and UNCTAD, in terms of international collaboration to enforce, to create regulations in terms of product safety. And we were very happy to have participated in the campaign for the adoption of the first ever UN principles on consumer product safety that was through a resolution adopted by the UN General Assembly last December. And now, of course, we are ready to keep moving forward and to keep implementing this resolution in practice. We also have our members doing a lot of great work. We selected only a few photos of what has been done already this year, and there was much more. We're very inspired for all this work that takes many different forms, being from consumer education, dialogues with policymakers, awareness campaigns, research, media campaigns, and all sorts of beautiful and great things that our members and partners are doing around the world to celebrate safe products, confident consumers. We also conducted a survey with our members leading up to today, and we received 55 responses from 45 countries in all regions of the world. And these are the numbers we identified. So 85% of respondents say their product safety system works poorly or only partially. 80% say consumers are more concerned about product safety than they were 5 years ago. 93% flag online marketplaces as a major or significant new risk. 58% say gender is rarely or never considered in product safety regulation. 89% describe cross-border cooperation as limited, minimal, or even non-existent. 89% see counterfeits as a major or significant increase in risk. 82% flag battery reuse, charging, and disposal as an increasing safety risk. And finally, 76% have campaigned or taken action on product safety in the last 2 years. So the scenario is very challenging and the numbers speak by themselves. But fortunately, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, our members are acting and will enhance their actions to address this challenge together. At this moment, we will have a special address from UNCTAD, from Mr. Remy Lang, the officer in charge for the consumer and competition policy at the UN. So join me in listening to Mr. Lang's message.
their invitation to join you in this important event, which is touching on a very timely issue, consumer product safety. The issue has become a global priority. This is confirmed this morning by the results of the survey just shown by ADELCO. In UNCTAD, we see two main reasons for this subject to be becoming such a priority. First, cross-border e-commerce and global supply chains have expanded rapidly. Products are often manufactured in one country, distributed through multiple intermediaries, and sold online in other countries, including through informal channels and social media. This makes it more complex to identify, track down, and remove unsafe products. Second, many countries are still developing their national product safety systems. According to UNCTAD's data, only 78 out of 122 countries for which we have official data have reported having a consumer product safety framework in place, which means that a significant number of countries still lack comprehensive legal and institutional structures. This is why UNCTAD member states defined and adopted the United Nations Principle for Consumer Product Safety. And I will now share my screen with my slides. On 15 December 2025, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the United Nations Principles for Consumer Product Safety. This represents an important milestone for global consumer protection, establishing the first international agreed guidance in this area. The principles provide a shared baseline to support governments in setting up or strengthening their product safety systems. They also help guide cooperation among regulators, businesses, and other stakeholders. Ultimately, the principle's objective is simple but powerful: to ensure that consumers everywhere can rely on products being safe, whether purchased in physical or online markets. The principles clarify that businesses bear the primary responsibility for product safety throughout the entire product lifecycle. At the same time, they encourage member states to empower public authorities with key tools to identify and manage risks, execute product recalls, and remove unsafe products from online marketplaces. Also, responsible authorities should ensure businesses take prompt corrective actions and should also inform and warn consumers about risks. Another critical element is international cooperation. In today's global and digital markets, unsafe products can circulate quickly across borders. This makes it essential for authorities to cooperate by sharing safety alerts, exchanging information on dangerous products, and coordinating enforcement actions. These principles are particularly important for developing countries, where regulatory frameworks are often still evolving. The United Nations General Assembly resolution called for UNCTAD member states to track and share experiences on the implementation of the principles through the UNCTAD Intergovernmental Group of Experts on Consumer Products Law and Policy. With the support of the European Commission, the UNCTAD Secretariat is currently preparing a handbook on consumer product safety. This is a practical guide to help policymakers and regulators strengthen national systems and harmonize approaches with international best practice. A first version of this document will be presented in July during the annual session of the UNCTAD Intergovernmental Group of Experts on Consumer Protection. In the meantime, I encourage you to scan this QR code to download a copy of the principles and learn more about this important new framework. I thank you for your attention.
Perfect. We thank UNCTAD and Mr. Remy Lang for this special address to us. Now we have on the screen our panelists for this session, and I should flag that Claudia and Stefan will be speaking in Spanish, and Wadi will be speaking in French. So again, if you need interpretation, click on the More button on the bottom of your screen, where you can see three dots inside the circle, and then choose your preferred language. Without further ado, now it's my pleasure to hand over to our moderator for this session, Sue Davies. Sue, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jericho. And good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on wherever you are in the world. It's a real pleasure to be chairing this really important session on World Consumer Rights Day. I think consumer product safety is an issue that really goes to the heart of consumer protection and has been a fundamental issue for the work of consumer organisations since we were first established. We've got a really fascinating panel here today that are going to be giving a range of perspectives. I'm Sue Davies and I'm from Which, the UK consumer organisation. So I wanted to start off by giving a bit of context and perspective from the UK, and then I'll hand over to my colleagues who'll give some views on what they see as the main consumer product safety challenges. But then we'll have the opportunity to explore what that means in terms of the type of actions we think are needed, and reflecting on some of the interventions today, including the presentation just from Remy highlighting the importance of the UN resolution and the work that will be going on a handbook, talk about what we as consumer organisations can do collectively and in order to influence the processes that are underway to make sure that consumers are safer. Could I encourage people right from the outset to look at the Q&A that's available within Zoom, and as the discussion moves ahead, leave any questions that you've got so that we can have a good discussion at the end when we've got about 15 minutes for questions from the audience. I think it was really interesting to see the perspectives from the Consumers International Survey, which really highlight how this is such an important issue still for consumers and how there are many gaps in protections, and it's become an issue that consumer organisations have been working on more in the last 5 years. That certainly reflects our experience within the UK. I think at one point it seemed as though product safety was an issue of the past. That's something that we had to focus on when we were first set up in the 1950s or 1960s. But in the past few years, Which has really stepped up our work on product safety. That includes the work that we've been doing through our product testing, but also our investigations and campaigns. Consumers and the way that they're shopping has been evolving, and so have the risks that consumers are facing. We've already heard from the presentations about the rise of e-commerce, which now is just taken for granted from people. 90% of people in the UK bought something from an online marketplace in the last 2 years. But also how we've got increasingly complex supply chains. Our focus has therefore been on tackling some of the gaps in our regulation, while on the one hand, we have strong and fairly robust regulations and a requirement that only safe products should be placed on the market. We found through our testing that we're just finding again and again hundreds of unsafe products that are for sale on online marketplaces. And there's a real regulatory gap because there's a lack of clarity about the responsibility of online marketplaces at the moment. To tie in with World Consumer Rights Day, we published an investigation that we'd undertaken looking at ladders, so telescopic ladders, where we found many unsafe ladders on sale on online marketplaces, which can have catastrophic consequences if somebody falls from one of these ladders. But that's just one of hundreds of types of products that we find. We've looked recently at child sleeping bags, for example, where we found lots of safety issues. We have looked at a range of electrical products, electrical heaters, chargers. We found carcinogenic balloons. If you look, you're likely to find these problems. I think what was particularly shocking and really brought home to us just how we don't have the right incentives within the system here is that we did a really comprehensive investigation that we published at the end of last year, where we created a tool and looked on online marketplaces for products that were subject to official government alerts. So where there was no doubt about their safety, where they had been recalled, and we found it was very, very easy across a whole range of online marketplaces to find these products. That was concerning in of itself, but also highlighted how if it was easy for us as a consumer organisation to find these unsafe products, it should be easy for the big tech companies who are developing these models and listing these products on their sites to have tighter controls. So this is an area that we've been campaigning on. It was encouraging for those who were able to join the session earlier today to hear the UK Consumer Minister say that there will be legislation coming soon in this area. This is something that Which has been really strongly campaigning for, and so we'll be scrutinising that legislation when it comes out to make sure that it really delivers for consumers. And the key thing is to place a duty on online marketplaces to make sure that they take more responsibility, both for preventing unsafe products from going on the market, but also monitoring and removing them when there are unsafe products as well. I don't think that this is certainly not an issue that is unique to the UK, and it just shows how increasingly we're dealing with complex cross-border issues where international cooperation and collaboration is really critical. I hope that gives you a sense of what the main priority for us is in the UK. It's not the only safety issue. We still find problems in more traditional retailers, but this is the really big issue that is really putting consumers' lives at risk at the moment. So I'd now like to turn to the panel and hear perspectives from a real mix of countries around the world and consumer organisations who've been very active in this area. I'd like to start with Claudia Collado from Argentina. If Claudia, you could start by telling us whether or not your main priority is also tackling online marketplaces or whether or not there are other challenges that you're dealing with in Argentina. So over to you. Thank you.
Ok, mira, en Argentina, primero muchas gracias por estar aquí con todos ustedes, un honor para nosotros. Te puedo decir que en Argentina estamos atravesando un momento muy particular. ¿Por qué? Porque hay un proceso de desregulación acelerada que se viene implementando desde fines del 2023 y tiene impactos concretos para los consumidores, especialmente para quienes se encuentran en situaciones de mayor vulnerabilidad. En el caso específico nuestro de Argentina, vemos un mercado donde conviven productos importados sin certificación junto a productos locales con estándares que son muchísimo más exigentes, ¿no? Y eso es un tema bastante complejo para nosotros porque esas diferencias afectan de forma desproporcionada a quienes no tienen acceso a la información de calidad ni a mecanismos de reclamo que sean efectivos, ¿no? A eso nosotros tenemos que sumarle en este país un contexto de inflación que todavía es muy elevada y hay una caída del poder adquisitivo que empuja a muchos consumidores a priorizar el precio por encima de la seguridad. Entonces compran en canales informales o eligen productos que no tienen certificación. Esa combinación, es decir, menos regulación y más consumidores bajo una presión económica es particularmente peligrosa. Y lo que necesitamos es que la regulación y las acciones no sean solo reactivas, es decir, que se actúe después del daño, sino que necesitamos que sea preventiva y con perspectiva de equidad, por supuesto. Esto implica mayor información, mayor educación al consumidor y mecanismos de consulta con organizaciones de consumidores para los que se puedan acceder a estándares mínimos y que no cedan ante la presión desreguladora. En cuanto a género en Argentina, si bien tenemos avances importantes, la implementación sigue siendo desigual. Los productos, por ejemplo, que están orientados hacia mujeres y niñas, como puede ser, no sé, los cosméticos, productos para maquillaje, no siempre reciben el mismo nivel de escrutinio. Las mujeres, que en muchos hogares siguen siendo las que toman las principales decisiones, se enfrentan a una mayor exposición al riesgo sin que esto se refleje en políticas específicas de protección para ellas. O sea que lo urgente es que la desregulación no se confunda con modernización, porque modernizar los sistemas de protección al consumidor significa hacerlos más ágiles, más efectivos, pero no desmantelarlos.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Claudia. I think that's a really interesting perspective, and it seems like you're facing a lot of challenges there. And as you say, I think it's something that a lot of countries are facing at the moment, where there is a cost of living crisis, and consumers are seeking cheaper products, often thinking that they've got the same level of protection, but not necessarily being aware of the risks that they're being exposed to. And a strong focus on deregulation as well, particularly we're seeing that in the UK, where there's a big focus on economic growth and cutting red tape, whereas we're trying to make the point that consumer protection is obviously fundamental to economic growth. Rose, do you want to go next and talk about whether or not this sort of chimes with you in Zimbabwe? Are you facing the same sorts of issues that Claudia's talked about in terms of certification? And I thought the gender imbalance was particularly concerning as well.
Certainly, yes, Sue. There's quite a lot of challenges that we have in terms of ensuring that consumers gain product safety. We do have many laws, a lot of legislation around product safety, consumer protection, but we continue to have challenges, particularly with online marketplaces, as well as cosmetics. Speaking to what Claudia has just been saying about gender, yes, we do have issues to do, particularly with cosmetics, where women would want to use skin lighteners. And a lot of the times, those skin lighteners are not safe, and they end up getting diseases such as cancer. We also have inefficient product recall systems, whereby sometimes products that have been recalled find themselves in another market within the country, and they are not destroyed sometimes. So that is inefficient. And our track and trace system is very weak. So in a nutshell, yes, we do have quite a number of challenges, particularly with our weak border controls, where the borders are sometimes very porous, and that poses danger for consumers. Yeah, so we really need a lot of work to be done, especially collaborative efforts to enable, protection of consumers. We need product certification to be mandatory, because for certain products where standards that are developed are voluntary, people can just keep, standardization and certification. And I believe that standardization and product certification are key to consumer protection where product safety is concerned. So we really need collaborative efforts there and interregulatory where it comes to, market surveillances so that our market surveillance systems can be strengthened and really make a big impact to protect consumers. Thank you very much. I think we can continue to have this discussion.
Thank you very much, Rose. And I think interesting that you're experiencing similar issues to us with the online marketplaces and also facing a lot of enforcement challenges as well, which seems to be, I think, a common issue across many countries. Stefan, would you like to go next and give a perspective from Chile? What types of challenges is it a similar story in Chile in terms of the issues that we've heard about so far, or are there any other sort of more specific issues in terms of products that you're experiencing?
Igualmente, de lo que dijo Claudia recientemente, hay una tendencia a desregular los mercados, por lo tanto, se afecta al consumidor. Sin embargo, en estas últimas etapas ha habido mayor regulación y mayor vigilancia a los marketplaces y el comercio online. Ahora, eso ha sido en parte por las acciones de las organizaciones de consumidores y la influencia que hemos tenido en la política pública. Sin embargo, el desafío sigue siendo muy grande. Nosotros creemos que, por una parte, la certificación del producto debe existir y eso tiene que hacerse con el Estado, el gobierno, la Agencia de Protección al Consumidor. Sin embargo, tenemos también que no solamente el labeling, no solamente el etiquetado, sino también tiene que estar acompañado de una educación al consumidor, es decir, de que la gente sepa distinguir entre lo que está certificado y lo que no está certificado. Además, nosotros creemos fundamental en el mediano plazo o lo más pronto posible hacer test comparativos. El test comparativo es la herramienta que por lo menos nosotros hemos aprendido de algunas organizaciones miembros de Consumidor International, que da el test comparativo independiente, porque hoy día encontramos por internet muchas comparaciones, pero que tienen cierta duda acerca de su independencia. Esos nosotros hemos realizado regularmente bastantes de servicios y productos. Ha servido mucho para distinguir cuál es un producto sano, pero un producto seguro de un producto inseguro. En ese sentido, ha sido nuestro aporte. Sin embargo, termino diciendo que tal como se han dicho repetidas veces acá, en un mundo global necesitamos también tener crossover, es decir, test internacionales, test transfronterizos, que ayuden a los países que estamos juntos en esta área del mundo a hacer test comparativos. Esto es perfectamente posible y esto es muy significativo en la medida que muchos productos que hoy día se consumen en este mercado global son los mismos que están en Argentina, que están en Perú o que están en otros países de América Latina. El test comparativo local y el test comparativo internacional creo yo que está dentro del desafío que tenemos como organizaciones de consumidores.
Thank you, Stefan. I think that's a really good point. I think, as you say, we're often dealing with the same products in different markets or variations of the same product, and we're often dealing with the same companies as well in many cases. And so the more that we can work together to highlight what the issues are and make sure that companies who aren't taking enough responsibility for product safety do obviously change their practices. It seems a challenge where there's always sort of pushback against regulation, but it's absolutely critical for consumers that product safety is still seen as a priority. It's certainly something as which that, as I said, we've been doing a lot of testing ourselves, and in a way, you almost feel that you're having to do what the businesses should be doing or what the enforcers should be doing in highlighting and policing some of these markets, and particularly in our case, the online marketplaces where we're seeing most of the problems. Shall we move to Morocco now and hear about what's happening in Morocco, Wadi? Sorry, I should have said, I haven't been asking you to introduce yourselves and your organisations, although hopefully everybody has the details, but if you could explain your organisation as well. Thank you.
Bonjour, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Je suis Madi Ouadia du Maroc, donc le président de la Fédération nationale des associations du Maroc. Et ma foi, nos problèmes, ils sont, si on veut dire, presque identiques que tous les problèmes de nos amis à travers le monde. Les consommateurs marocains font face à plusieurs défis liés à la qualité des produits et des services dans différents secteurs. Donc, il y a effectivement la variabilité de la qualité des produits sur le marché, la présence de certains produits non conformes ou de certains produits aussi contrefaits, malgré que nous avons des structures de normalisation et de conformité qui sont sur place. Il y a une différence de qualité entre les produits destinés à l'exportation et notamment ceux qui sont vendus au marché local. Ça aussi, c'est une remarque assez récurrente. Et les produits, effectivement, du marché informel qui sont sans contrôle et sans vérification. Ceci cause aussi des problèmes donc, de qualité des produits. Il y a aussi le manque de transparence et d'information au niveau de certains produits, l'insuffisance de l'information concernant certains produits, notamment les produits qui sont contrefaits ou les produits qui sont fabriqués localement, peuvent aussi avoir le manque d'information si, ma foi, ils sont fabriqués d'une manière, disons, informelle et ne pas suivre les procédures et les mesures réglementaires. Le problème aussi est lié à la qualité des services, et notamment quand on parle du secteur du transport, de la télécommunication, du commerce électronique, qui constitue maintenant un élément très, très, très important dans le commerce en général. Et nous avons un phénomène aussi qui est assez récurrent, c'est la vente à travers les pages des réseaux sociaux. Et nous avons pu recenser presque de 80%, 82% des réclamations que nous avons reçues à travers nos plateformes de réclamation se sont liées au problème du commerce électronique via les plateformes, notamment Instagram, Facebook, et TikTok et tout ce qui en suit. Ce sont des éléments effectivement qui contribuent énormément sur le manque de qualité de certains produits et ma foi, nous, autant que mouvement consumériste marocain, nous nous trouvons dans des situations très difficiles pour pouvoir effectivement trouver des solutions aux consommateurs qui ont des prix, qui ont des problèmes dans ceci. S'ajoute à cela la hausse des prix par rapport à la qualité. Il y a des fois où on constate que nous avons certains produits qui ne sont pas de bonne qualité, mais malheureusement qui subissent des augmentations de prix, notamment dans la conjoncture actuelle où le plus important pour le consommateur, c'est de chercher effectivement un produit avec un coût qui est moindre, mais bon, quand il veut mettre le prix aussi, il se heurte à une situation peut-être conflictuelle, celle d'arnaque ou de problème d'honnêteté de certains professionnels. Donc, en général, il faut dire que le Maroc aussi dispose de pas mal de réglementations, donc de cadres juridiques de protection du consommateur. Donc, dans ce contexte-là, donc, à part la loi de la protection du consommateur, nous disposons d'un règlement, d'un cadre juridique qui est assez important, ceux de la sécurité des produits et services, ceux qui sont aussi de l'encadrement des médicaments. Nous avons aussi des lois qui sont complémentaires, telles que la loi relative à la sécurité sanitaire des produits alimentaires, la loi de la réglementation des prix et de la concurrence, la loi sur le commerce électronique. Tout l'arsenal réglementaire, il est disponible et je dirais aussi que c'est un arsenal disponible réglementaire bien efficace et qui suit les recommandations au niveau international. Mais ce que nous avons aussi comme problème, c'est effectivement le contrôle du marché. Et ça, là où le problème existe, là où le bas blesse, là où le consommateur sent qu'il n'est pas protégé sur son marché. Et malheureusement, donc ça, c'est un phénomène sur lequel nous travaillons. Nous essayons à maintes reprises d'essayer de mettre des ponts entre nous, mouvements consuméristes, et les organisations réglementaires ou les départements ministériels réglementaires qui ils ont cette tâche de contrôler les prix et nous essayons malheureusement de pouvoir effectivement les convaincre d'assurer une protection du consommateur, notamment dans la sécurité des produits, sachant très bien qu'au niveau du Maroc, nous avons presque une dizaine de départements ou d'administrations de contrôle et que chaque administration fait son travail indépendamment de l'autre. Et ça, c'est un problème donc justement de synergie et de travail mutuel entre les administrations de contrôle.
Thank you, Wadi. That's really helpful. I think we're hearing across the board that enforcement is a real challenge and partly about the structure within national government, but also I think with the challenges and your point about social media, I think is something that we are all recognizing in terms of the way that people are increasingly shopping, not just the online marketplaces. So finally, before we start to talk about how we tackle all of these things that we've been talking about, Michael, how does that fit with what you're seeing in Kenya? And sorry, could you introduce yourself as well? Sorry, I should have said that for everybody. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much. Michael Mungoma here from Youth Education Network in Kenya. And I really want to resonate with the rest of my colleagues here when it comes to how powerful and how impactful the digital marketplace has in terms of safety of products. But I also just want to highlight the fact that we now have young people also coming in, so it becomes even more concerning if it touches on generations. With that, they have access to digital technology and phones and computers and so on, and they're able to interact with the marketplaces, whether they're supervised or not supervised, which creates another layer of safety of products because the market doesn't really care. It just thinks about getting the transaction done. So if it's young people, probably in schools or colleges, having access to products. It could be food, it could be electronics, that in our setting here, we have weak post marketing surveillance where products can get into the market, and since we don't have the capacity, especially in rural areas or informal markets, and that's where the biggest populations are. Specific times where people go for to get these products, whether it's in the evening or a lot of online shopping that takes place at night. It makes it even more challenging to know what is circulating, to know what is available, to know what is accessible, and even to track and trace who was involved in some of these trades. So low consumer awareness, again, is something that it's also a challenge in Kenya, and it touches on what has already been said. What's genuine? What's counterfeit? Who knows whether this is a branded product or not? And it's until people feel that they have lost money, or probably it starts affecting them, no matter what the product is when they start looking at where the redress mechanisms. I appreciate the fact, again, we have a lot of laws. There's a lot of legislation there, and some of the different laws may define safety requirements differently. You know, that's one of the things. One may focus on probably if it's food hygiene standards, and when enforcement is fragmented, that just allows anyone to come in with anything, and it becomes more and more challenging to really to respond to safety emergencies, because we're not just thinking about random cases. We're thinking also of situations where, for example, we have a contamination, and it becomes very difficult to respond to that as an emergency. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. I mean, I think it's really interesting just to see how much common ground there is across all of it in terms of what we've all been saying, even though we've, come from, I suppose, quite different contexts, cultural backgrounds, whatever. But the rise of online marketplaces and online shopping is obviously something that consumers in all of our countries are increasingly engaging with, and not necessarily always appreciating that they're not protected in the way that they think they should be. Enforcement seems to be a really big issue, and lack of market surveillance across the board. And also consumer awareness, although I always worry that, in a way, you can't rely on we need to explain to consumers what they need to look for, but we need to make sure that they're properly protected in the first place to the extent that we can. So should we move on to talking about what we think can be done to address this? Because it seems a pretty depressing landscape. So what do you think can happen? And Michael, do you want to go first, as you went last time? And what do you think the priority is? And I guess in a way, we've got the UN resolution, we've got a handbook, so we've got the opportunity to actually say what we think at least should be in there, and what the direction to government should be, and what this means for businesses as well.
Yeah, I think as an organization, we still believe that education is power. So consumer education comes first. We really need to empower consumers to make good decisions, to know what is there, to be able to distinguish between genuine and counterfeit, and also look for platforms where if it's a digital platform, where redress mechanisms are also clearly defined before engaging in any activity. And of course, since the market is clearly shifting to the digital space, we need maybe just to strengthen, this is a second, digital traceability. And it's not just for the products themselves, but also for the vendors, so that we are able to know where some of these things are coming from, and be able to track them in real time. And of course, now strengthening market surveillance, getting the right people in, consolidating a bit of this legislation so that these people can work together instead of getting all these fragmentation supported by the system as well as government. So consumer organizations can again advocate for alignment of some of these things, simplifying messaging, and also just prioritizing entry of new products into the market that meet certain safety standards, and not just convenience. And that if consumers are able to be educated around the difference between convenience and safety, then this will shift how the market behaves. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Claudia, you spoke at the start about the kind of deregulatory context in which you're operating. What's your focus, and what do you think can be done in order to try and better protect consumers? And I guess, how do you think we can work together in order to try and push that? I mean, I think from what we've heard, there's a common issue about enforcement challenges and the need for cross-border enforcement and more cooperation. Do you think that's something that is realistic and that with Consumers International we can push for? Claudia, did you hear the question? Sorry. Can
Ahí sí, ¿se me oye?
Sí, perfecto.
Yes.
Sí.
Yes.
Porque me salía
Yeah,
perdón,
okay.
pero me salía un cartel que no estaba habilitada. Ok, mira, nosotros en Argentina, desde ADELCO, que es la organización que yo represento, vemos que el comercio electrónico ha crecido de una manera sostenida en los últimos años y hoy representa una parte muy significativa del consumo cotidiano. Sin embargo, los mecanismos de protección no han acompañado ese crecimiento como hubiéramos deseado. Tenemos una ley de protección al consumidor, ley de defensa del consumidor, que reconoce derechos claros, incluyendo, por ejemplo, el derecho al arrepentimiento en compras online, pero entre el derecho reconocido en la ley y la experiencia real del consumidor que intenta ejercer ese derecho, hay una brecha enorme. Entonces, los problemas más frecuentes que identificamos son productos que no coinciden con lo publicado o vendedores sin domicilio legal claro en el país, especialmente en plataformas de origen chino que han crecido muchísimo aquí en Argentina, y los procesos de devolución diseñados para desalentar el reclamo son increíbles. Y muchas plataformas se presentan como meros intermediarios, es decir, eludiendo cualquier responsabilidad directa. Nosotros tenemos un sistema de ventanilla única de reclamos aquí en Argentina y es una muy buena herramienta, pero varía su efectividad de acuerdo a la jurisdicción donde se realiza ese reclamo. Tenemos un país muy grande y en muchas provincias los organismos de protección al consumidor están como desbordados o bien tienen recursos muy limitados. Entonces, esto hace que los tiempos de respuesta sean a veces incompatibles con la urgencia que muchas veces tiene el problema o la queja. Y muchas empresas no responden a los reclamos del consumidor. Lo que necesitamos nosotros en Argentina, y posiblemente lo necesiten ustedes también, y en la región, aquí en Latinoamérica es legislación que establezca responsabilidad solidaria de las plataformas digitales por los productos que comercializan. Creemos que si una plataforma cobra comisión por una venta, debe responder también por la seguridad del producto. Y eso aquí no está ocurriendo. Adicionalmente, creemos que se necesitan acuerdos de cooperación con países de origen de los productos más problemáticos o donde se alojan las plataformas y para que existan de esta manera mecanismos de reclamo verdaderamente accesibles para los consumidores en español y que sean simples y con tiempos de resolución razonable. No sé si habrá tiempo, pero Stefan dijo algo muy importante en relación a los test comparativos de productos y en esta campaña del Día Mundial del Consumidor nosotros estamos relanzando los test comparativos de productos que veníamos haciendo y en algún momento de la vida de ADELCO desde 1980 aquí tuvimos que discontinuar. Pero si hay tiempo, obviamente les hablaré de eso también. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Claudia. We're getting a bit tight on time, but hopefully we can come back to you. I think that's a really interesting point, and the way that you've described it is how we've approached it in the UK, that we've done lots of testing and we've kept finding products. And when we've reported them to the platforms, they've often taken them down and then they come back again. And so we feel that the only way to have the right incentives for them to make sure that they're prioritizing product safety is to make sure that there is a clear legal responsibility, because they are the only ones that can do the checks on their sellers and can make sure that the products are removed swiftly. And enforcement is an issue as well, but we feel that getting that in the law is crucial. Who would like to go next? Stefan, did you want to say a bit more about what you think the right approach is now and what you think the priority is and what are you hopeful that you might be able to achieve? As I said, we're feeling reasonably optimistic that we will get some legislation in the UK, and that's because we've been campaigning and also working with organisations like the Fire Brigade, like the toy manufacturers, because some businesses are being undercut by cheaper, unsafe products, and they also want the law to be tightened as well. So we've been working as part of a coalition to put pressure on the government to strengthen protections in the UK. So could you say a bit more about what you see the priority in terms of strengthening protections?
Okay. Perdón. ¿Aló? No. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Si nosotros vemos una realidad como la descrita por Claudia, se repite en varios países de América Latina, en casi todos, en relación a lo que el producto indica y lo que contiene, en relación a, sobre todo también en el marketplace, cuando ofrecen algo y lo cumplen a media. Entonces, si nosotros tenemos una situación así, en una política que tiende a desregular la protección del consumidor, nosotros tenemos solamente un instrumento. Uno, presionar al gobierno, a los gobernantes, a los stakeholders, con el fin de que protejan a las personas. Pero la herramienta principal que tenemos es la fortaleza de o la debilidad de las organizaciones de consumidores. Es decir, el clásico dilema entre las necesidades que tenemos y las posibilidades que tenemos, esa gap, esa brecha ha ido creciendo en otros países. Por lo tanto, en relación a cuáles son los instrumentos, en definitiva, que el gobierno haga lo que tiene que hacer, y si no lo hace, estamos nosotros. Está la organización de consumidores. Pero una organización de consumidores débil no es capaz muchas veces de llevar adelante algunas cosas. Digo, por ejemplo, a propósito de lo que se decía del marketplace y la responsabilidad solidaria, a propósito de que ellos se dicen a sí mismos solamente intermediarios, que yo creo que tal como tú dices y como dijo Claudia, se repite. En nuestro país, en Chile, solamente tenemos un instrumento para resolver eso. Es un instrumento que es la class action. La class action implica que obviamente hay un domicilio conocido, pero ahí está, solamente para graficar, que tenemos entre 4 y 5 años para una resolución en tribunal. Lo que quiero decir es que no existe un instrumento legal en el cual yo pueda ir a un tribunal yo solo, Stefan, y decir que me han engañado con esto de marketplace. ¿Por qué la Agencia de Protección al Consumidor no tiene los instrumentos legales fuertes como para decidir el retiro del producto o sancionar al proveedor en este caso? Entonces, este tipo de cosas significa que cuando se habla de enforcement, se habla de enforcement legal de los instrumentos que tenemos, pero también se habla de fortalecimiento de las organizaciones de consumidores. Sin el fortalecimiento de las organizaciones de consumidores, nosotros vamos a seguir viendo un mercado que se convierte cada vez más en un mercado salvaje, donde se vende de todo y donde nadie puede protegerse a sí mismo. El único, si es por optimismo, el optimismo tiene que radicar en el fortalecimiento de la organización de consumidores a través de algunos temas que podemos conversar, que hay muchos, pero en una situación de debilidad pierde la transparencia del mercado y pierden las personas.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Stefan. And I think interesting that, as you say, you're thinking more along the lines of sort of direct intervention and legal action, which I think we all have sort of varying ability to pursue that within our national regulatory framework. Rose, do you want to come back and say a bit more about what you think the priorities are from a Zimbabwe perspective? You highlighted quite a few issues, the online marketplaces issue, but also issues around certification and challenges with market surveillance. What do you think the priority is, and what do you think is the most important thing for us to be doing as consumer organisations at the moment?
Thank you for that question, Sue. So as consumer organizations, we do have a lot of work to do, especially where standardization and certification of products is concerned. But it begins with consumer education and consumer awareness, particularly in countries such as ours, where there are rural, the majority of the population live in the rural areas, which are quite remote. So information needs to go far and wide to educate consumers, leaving no one behind, so that everyone can be able to take responsibility and look at products as they purchase, to look for the proper labels, because there is a lot of misleading advertising that goes onto labels. There are a lot of counterfeits, and consumers need to be encouraged to look at verification marks to ensure that those products that they are purchasing are not fake, they are not counterfeit. But furthermore, even products that have followed the certification processes, sometimes you realize that there are certification marks that are not real. People are stealing certification marks and using them to pretend that those products are authentic. So the need for that. But further to that, product testing, I think, stands out as a key component of consumer protection, because that is the only way that we can really ensure, verify, give accreditation if products have been tested, and capacitation of consumer organizations, particularly those that do not have laboratories or those that are not in a position to collaborate internationally with global laboratories for consumer verification. I think it's very key. I would really advocate to say all those countries that are not yet and capacitated to test products for safety, if we could collaborate and be able to carry out comparative testing of products to ensure their safety. I think that's one of the biggest things that would really ensure that consumers are protected. But here at home, Consumer Council of Zimbabwe has innovated. We are in the process of rolling out our citizen verified digital platform, which uses a QR code for consumers to be able to scan and see whether the product is genuine or not, and also to see the labeling. But it's not enough just to see whether it's genuine. Even the genuine products need to have gone through tests to ensure that they are safe. So there is a lot that we need to do. Tied to that, even the cross-border alerts are also very important. We do have COMESA, and we think it's a very good platform, but we could have it even at the global level, where consumer organizations are able to post consumer alerts so that consumers can immediately be informed and be able to protect themselves. So there is a lot that we can do, but I think I'm not sure about the time that we have, but I actually believe that we need to have ongoing sessions even after World Consumer Rights Day, so that as consumer protectors, we can have these virtual meetings and be able to share ideas and come up with work plans, a global work plan as members of Consumers International, to say, where do we go from here? From World Consumer Rights Day 2026, what is the way forward? Because we don't want to just make it a talk show where we are sharing challenges and way forward and so on, but never there to then actually get together. So thank you so much for the
Thank you, Rose. And
opportunity.
I think that's very well said. And I think that having the theme of World Consumer Rights Day has clearly really highlighted what an important issue this is for so many members, and just how much work is going on that we could be sharing and collaborating with. So Wadi, would you like to finish this session or this part of the session by setting out what you think the priorities are? You set out a range of complex challenges in terms of some of the gaps that you're seeing, and particularly the rise of social media. What do you see as the main and the most important thing to be doing at the moment?
Alors, pour nous, je crois que Je crois que le renforcement de la sensibilisation des consommateurs de leurs droits et de leurs priorités est quelque chose de très important, de très intéressant. S'ajoute à cela, effectivement, et pour pouvoir justement donner cette information claire et limpide aux consommateurs, les tests achats et la comparaison des produits sont des éléments très efficaces pour pouvoir effectivement mettre le consommateur en face de ses choix. Et pour cela, donc, il faut effectivement un partage de savoir-faire, notamment avec des organisations qui ont déjà ces outils-là et qui peuvent les partager avec d'autres associations, les associations membres du Consommateurs International. C'est une idée qui est très importante. Il y a aussi une plateforme d'alerte qui est transfrontalière. Cette plateforme va devoir effectivement enrichir l'information du consommateur, l'information des associations du consommateur pour pouvoir effectivement savoir quels sont les produits qui sont dangereux, quels sont les produits qu'il faudrait éviter ou quels sont les produits qu'il faudrait effectivement s'alerter. Ceci dit, c'est parce que bon, au niveau de la loi et au niveau des gouvernements, ces alertes existent, mais ce qui n'existe pas, c'est au sein de notre mouvement consumériste, une idée comme celle-ci sera le bienvenu. Il y a aussi le renforcement du contrôle et l'application stricte de la loi. Ça, c'est un élément qui est essentiel et qui est relatif au pouvoir public et les poursuites des actions du plaidoyer et de sensibilisation menées par les associations de consommateurs. D'ailleurs, c'est le seul outil que nous avons, nous, autant que mouvement consumériste, entre les mains. C'est la sensibilisation et essayer de jouer notre rôle autant que plaidoyer. Il y a une autre chose que nous, au Maroc, dont nous disposons, c'est effectivement, comme Claudia venait de le dire, les guichets consommateurs, enfin les guichets qui sont à la disposition du consommateur et qui peuvent effectivement trouver des solutions entre le consommateur et le fournisseur dans le cadre où il y a une solution à trouver, mais dans le cadre où il y a si on veut dire, une entorse à la loi, et surtout dans le domaine de la qualité du produit, là, je crois que l'administration doit intervenir et doit arrêter effectivement ce genre de produits qui sont sur le marché, le retirer, les détruire et toute la procédure réglementaire. Nous, en tant que mouvement consumériste, on doit insister et on doit effectivement les obliger à mettre en exécution toute la réglementation qui défend les intérêts du consommateur.
Thank you very much, Wadi. Well, I think we've heard a range of perspectives on some of the priority issues. I think we can sum up and highlight what we see some of the priorities, but it would be good first to hear from the audience and see if we've got any questions for the panel or any other comments on what people have heard. I can't see any questions at the moment. Does that mean that there aren't any questions? Which I think would be surprising. No questions just yet. Well, that gives us a bit more time to explore some of the issues that we've been talking about. I'd be interested in what you think about the challenge of market surveillance and the challenge of enforcement. I think everybody has highlighted this, and we've talked a lot about raising awareness for consumers. But what do you think can be done in terms of the enforcement powers or market surveillance powers, and also how we can use the focus of the UN work to try and get better cross-border cooperation between governments? Is that something that you think is realistic? I mean, we've had initiatives through OECD. We will have this handbook, but it still seems a challenge in order to get actual effective coordination, even at a basic level of sharing product safety alerts, for example. So I think we've talked a lot about how we as consumer organizations can be doing that ourselves. But does anyone have any thoughts on the types of powers that are needed, or what would make the market surveillance and enforcement side more effective, given the challenges that we're facing? Did anybody want to respond to that? Michael, did you have any
Sí,
thoughts? Oh, sorry,
yo-
Claudia, you're
sí, a mí me gustaría decir que nosotros en este momento estamos relanzando test comparativos de productos y esto nos permite prevenir, nos permite alertar, nos permite dar información clara, que es lo que muchos de ustedes están diciendo que hay que darle y brindar al consumidor. Nosotros tenemos una ley que exige que le demos información clara y suficiente y cierta, pero el tema pasa siempre, creo, por una cuestión financiera. Para nosotros poder retomar los test comparativos, los ensayos y poder realizar alertas y poder dar información, nos ha costado muchísimo retomarlo y lo ideal, creo, que en este momento para adelante lo que se podría hacer es hacer, bueno, yo hablo de un mecanismo regional porque me centro en América Latina, ojalá lo pudiéramos hacer también con el resto con Rose que estaba interesada y demás. Pero para eso se necesita un financiamiento o un proyecto que financie una plataforma donde cada organización que puede hacer test comparativos pueda poner ahí sus resultados. ¿Por qué digo esto? Porque nos damos cuenta que en Argentina se compra en las mismas plataformas que compra Bolivia, Paraguay, Colombia, Ecuador, Chile, etcétera, etcétera. Los países de nuestra región están comprando todos en las mismas plataformas. Entonces, si nosotros hacemos un test comparativo de un producto, seguramente ese producto también se está consumiendo en un país vecino. Entonces, ahí deberíamos unir esfuerzos. ¿Por qué? Porque si nosotros hicimos un test comparativo sobre un determinado producto, otro país podría hacerlo sobre otro producto y volcar todos los resultados en esa plataforma. Yo propongo eso, pero sabiendo que esto implica un gran proyecto con gran financiamiento, porque los test comparativos no son accesibles a todas las organizaciones de consumidores. Las asociaciones no tienen recursos para hacerlos y son muy caros. Entonces, creo que mirando para adelante, para que no quede esto en solamente un Día Mundial del Consumidor, deberíamos pensar a nivel regional y obviamente, ojalá a nivel global, algún proyecto que pueda compatibilizar, donde se pueda utilizar ese manual que se va a lanzar en julio del 2026 de este año y donde todas las asociaciones podamos colaborar para que los consumidores tengan información cierta sobre lo que están comprando. Eso sería fantástico porque yo creo que a nosotros nos pasa igual que a Stefan. Nosotros tenemos acciones de clase, pero un consumidor individual no puede llevar adelante eso. No sé, estoy extendiéndome, me parece. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Claudia. I think that's a really good suggestion and something that we can hopefully work with Consumers International to make sure that we're following up on. As you say, we are doing testing and we're identifying problems, but we don't necessarily share them with each other at the moment. I mean, we will be publicizing our findings, but if we have a mechanism to be sharing them, and obviously our priority is to get unsafe products off the market as quickly as possible. we're also often dealing with the same marketplaces now as well, and we're dealing with products that are originating all over the world. It's not a national issue anymore, is it? It's a very much a kind of, it's often crossing multiple jurisdictions. I was thinking of issues like I mentioned that we tested balloons and found that they got carcinogenic chemicals in, which is wouldn't really have expected. And those sorts of issues are things that I'm sure are common issues across many marketplaces where we could be working more closely together. We've got a couple of comments here in the questions now. We've had somebody who can do searches of online marketplaces. And a comment here that the UNCTAD guidelines are the ongoing OECD work on online marketplaces should result in concrete measures to improve collaboration between authorities. There needs to be more sharing of tools. These tools are available and have already been displayed in some jurisdictions around the world, but they need to be shared. We also need to have authorities share intelligence on rogue economic operators, and recalled products are coming back onto the market. Yeah, as we've heard, this kind of whack-a-mole approach. So I guess there is an opportunity with the work of UNCTAD and the work of OECD, but I think we feel strongly. We heard OECD talking about the pledges that have been developed by online marketplaces, but certainly we've seen pledges in Europe, and we still find lots of unsafe products. So we need something more robust than voluntary pledges. Does anybody else have any comments on what we can be doing in terms of how we collaborate? It seems sharing best practice in terms of regulation as well, as we're finding ways to regulate the way that markets are evolving, would be something that would be valuable. As I said, we're hopefully going to be working on a law in the UK soon. We know that we can't take that for granted until it's passed into legislation and is sufficiently robust. But that seems to be an area where perhaps we could be collaborating. Does anybody else want to say about what you think is the most important thing in terms of how we work together and collaborate with Consumers International? Do others agree with the importance of sharing our testing results, and how realistic is that for you to have these kind of platforms that Claudia was talking about?
Bien évidemment, moi, je partage cette idée-là. Que j'ai dit, bien évidemment, je partage cette idée-là. C'est très important d'avoir effectivement une plateforme sur laquelle nous y serons tous pour pouvoir effectivement savoir et partager toutes les informations, notamment pour les tests comparatifs et les comparaisons des produits. J'ai juste aussi une question, et je ne sais pas si on peut avoir l'expérience effectivement de d'autres associations dans le cadre d'une réglementation concernant le e-commerce sur les réseaux sociaux. Parce que, bon, chez nous, au Maroc, nous avons une loi qui définit effectivement la vente sur la vente électronique et le contrat électronique, et la réglementation, elle est claire. Mais ce qui nous échappe, c'est effectivement la vente sur les réseaux sociaux, et qui est franchement un casse-tête ici au Maroc. Je ne sais pas si dans d'autres cieux, est-ce qu'il y a une réglementation, une loi qui régule ce genre de commerce électronique.
Thank you very much, Wadi. Does anybody else have any views on how realistic it is to collaborate? I'm just having a look at some of the questions that have just come in. I think we're getting more comments than questions. We've had a question here, which is, sorry, I'm just controlling the chat. Here we have many authorities remove unsafe listings from marketplaces, yet the same products frequently reappear under new sellers' listings or platforms. Without continuous monitoring, how can enforcement realistically keep unsafe products off the market? I think that's something that we've all been reinforcing. And a comment that many monitoring and enforcement systems are complaint driven, but if consumers aren't aware of the rules and standards, how do they know what to complain about? Which I think probably reinforces that we can't rely on consumers to be identifying unsafe products. We need to make sure that we've got robust enough frameworks there in the first place. If the team from Consumers International can just tell me, have I missed any questions? Because I've seen a few comments, but oh, we've had another question. Can the consumer organisations urge governments to make it mandatory for consumer protection associations to play a role? I presume that's play a role in the setting of the regulatory framework, is it? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? I mean, do you feel that having stronger mandatory requirements for our involvement is essential? Rose, how effectively are you engaged? It sounds like you're very involved in what's happening at a government level at the moment.
Thank you. What Consumer Council of Zimbabwe did as an association, an NGO, is we lobbied for the Consumer Protection Act. And within the Consumer Protection Act, there was the institutionalization of the Consumer Authority, which is called the Consumer Protection Commission. And so the Consumer Protection Commission is required to capacitate consumer organizations, consumer associations, consumer advocacy bodies. And they are starting to register with the commission. And as for CCZ, because CCZ was there before the commission, it is now being capacitated, but not adequately, because the commission is just starting, and even going forward, they will now be capacitating everybody else. So it remains very important for council to be able to engage in other income generating projects. One, to maintain independence, but also to ensure that it's got the capacity to deliver consumer protection as much as possible. Our greatest challenge at the moment is financial incapacity, but we are working towards collaboration with quite a number of regulators, like in the telecoms sector. We work with the regulator for ICT and telecoms. We also work with the energy regulator, ZERA. We work with many other regulators who have a component of consumer protection. Sometimes we even work with regulatory boards such as Health Professions Authority that helps us with technical information for the health of the public. So there's quite a number of ways that we can use to try and work with the regulators. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rose. That's helpful to understand. Well, I think we're nearly out of time. So I think it's been a really interesting discussion where we've managed to highlight a range of different issues. I think it's really reinforced just how important our work is on consumer product safety as consumer organisations. And in these challenging times, challenging times economically for consumers, but also a time when there is a lot of deregulatory pressure at government level as well. We need to use all of our resources and tools to make sure that product safety is a priority. I think the gaps that we've been talking about, there's an awful lot of common ground. We've been talking about the rise of e-commerce and the way that people are shopping in different ways, online marketplaces, social media, cross-border purchases, raising new challenges, and ones that regulatory frameworks aren't necessarily fit for purpose for at the moment, and also where there are a lot of enforcement and market surveillance challenges. I think we've heard a lot of issues about certification and robustness and importance of product testing, and also the risk of counterfeits as well, and how we counteract that. I think consumer awareness and how to identify products and what to look for people to try and keep themselves safe is sort of a fundamental issue as consumer organisations that we should be providing. But I think there's also some areas where hopefully the focus of World Consumer Rights Day can help us as consumer organisations to continue to work better together. And I thought Claudia's idea of the platform for sharing information reflected a lot of the comments that others on the panel had made before about the value of the product testing that we do and the value of the intelligent sharing and information that we have so that we can identify products. But I think this is also a real opportunity to make sure that we get much better cross-border collaboration from governments. And so we've got the opportunity with the work that UNCTAD is going to be doing, the work that OECD has already initiated, to really try and make sure that we have a more robust approach to addressing these challenges. So the resolution and the principles are obviously a good start, but I think now we need to make sure and work together to make sure it actually turns into something really concrete and something that we can use at international level to continue apply pressure in our national context as well, to make sure that we get better protections for consumers. So the time seems to have gone very quickly. I really appreciate everybody's contributions, and apologies for not introducing you all properly to start with as well, which obviously wasn't ideal. But I really appreciate your contributions, and I think we've started to set out the kind of direction that Consumers International can be taking this forward beyond World Consumer Rights Day. So thank you to everybody, and thank you to the audience for participating. And I think this has been a very, very good theme for World Consumer Rights Day that probably really speaks to the principles that were set out way back in 1962 and is the reason that we celebrate this year every day. So thank you very much, everybody. Eriko, did you want to say anything before we close the session?
Thank you very much, Sue. No, that was all great. I just wanted to thank you for moderating it, and thank you all the speakers and our amazing members for the great ideas. And we certainly will look into many of them and how we can progress together and move forward. Thank you very much, everybody. It was a pleasure, and happy World Consumer Rights Day.